Hello, I'm Locke Meredith. I'd like to invite you to join me on the next Legal Lines, where my guest is Jimmy Durbin. He is a former mayor of Denham Springs. He was mayor for 12 years. Jimmy's going to talk to us about how he's made that city, along with the council and all the folks who live there, a model for how a city should be run. How he's financed infrastructure improvements and brought millions, hundreds of millions of dollars in investments, and some of the top schools, top 10 schools in the state. So join us on the next Legal Lines with Jimmy Durbin.
It's time now for Legal Lines Tips with your host, Locke Meredith.
Hello, I'm Locke Meredith with a Legal Lines tip for you. If you have to hire a lawyer, and I hope you don't, but if you do, hire a lawyer that you like, that you trust, and who specializes in your area of need. In these days, with all the laws we have, lawyers for the most part now specialize. They specialize in contracts, defense, business, personal injury, all kinds of areas of the law. So when you interview with a lawyer, ask him, does he specialize in the area of your need? Has he tried the cases? Has he been successful? And of course, how does he charge you? Is his fee hourly? Is it a percentage of the case if he recovers? What exactly does he charge? So my Legal Lines tip from me, Locke Meredith, to you is, if you have to hire a lawyer, hire one you like, you trust, and who specializes in your area of need.
This has been Legal Lines Tips with your host, Locke Meredith.
Hello, welcome to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith, and I'm very pleased to have on the show for the very first time Mayor Jimmy Durbin. Jimmy, it's great to see you and have you on the show.
It's my pleasure, Locke.
And I know technically you're now a former mayor, and that's of the city, the great city of Denham Springs. Tell the folks kind of a little bit about that.
Well, since January 1, I've been retired. I'm no longer the mayor of the city of Denham Springs, for which I served for 12 years as mayor, 3 terms.
3 terms?
3 4-year terms, and it was a wonderful experience. We were able to accomplish a lot of wonderful things, that we being the city council and I, are the councils that I worked with over the years.
I've had y'all's, I guess it's president of the Livingston Parish, Leighton Ricks, and also the Sheriff Jason Arden. Livingston is one of the fastest growing parishes in the state, and of course Denham Springs has been part of that growth.
Denham Springs and the surrounding area along the west side of the parish is just the most populous part of Livingston Parish. We attribute a lot of this to the school system in Livingston Parish, the population growth. But of course it deals with leadership and attractiveness of the developments, the residential developments in the parish over the years, and the appearance that people like when they drive in from East Baton Rouge Parish, 190, Magnolia Beach Road, the interstate, coming from the south across the bridge at Port Vincent. It's just a lovely place to come visit and be part of. And you know, I've been there. This is my 67th year, and I've lived in Denham Springs all my life.
Born and raised. Yeah, I read Denham Springs. And tell the folks a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm 67. I was born in 1947 to Erlo and Mildred Durbin, and my parents had 3 children. I have 2 sisters. One is 8 years older than I am. She's 75, and then I have my youngest sister, Ginger.
Been married, what, 32 years?
I've been married 37 years.
37 years. I better get that right. Huh?
Well,
at least you better.
37 years on St. Patrick's Day, March 17th. Well, I will be married to
congratulations on that. Two children, both of whom are lawyers like you.
I was surprised at their choices for careers and education, and they chose the law. And both attended Tulane Law School after graduating from LSU undergrad. And
you're from Loyola?
I graduated from Loyola Law School.
Right. And then an economics degree?
Economics degree from LSU. I graduated from Loyola. My 2 law partners that eventually we created a practice with my dad, Erlo, Durbin, Bordy, and Fogg in 1974. We all attended Loyola and graduated from Loyola. Judge Chuck Bordy, Judge Kenneth Fogg, and they all chose the judicial career.
Right.
And of course my dad, who was a 1936 LSU law graduate.
Wow, quite a history there.
Yeah.
Explain a little bit about you had a private practice, but even while you were in private practice for years, you were involved in kind of the running of Denham Springs as a council person.
Well, I began practicing law in late 1973. And in 1989, I was representing the police chief, then police chief. He is currently the police chief for Denham Springs again, Scott Jones. And I felt like I disagreed with the administration on that handling of that particular case. It gave me, well, a very reputable business person, Jerry Smith, was on the council, and he resigned with more than a year to go on his term, so that opened up a special election, and I chose to run for that special election in the summer of 1989, was elected.
Kind of never looked back.
It was another individual running for that position, and I won, and I served on the council for 13 years, a little over 13 years as a city councilman, mayor pro tem.
So you knew how the city council works, and as I understand it, it's a total of five folks?
5 city councilmen, city council positions.
And they're elected at large, you said?
Elected at large. Meaning throughout what? The city. Well, that means they represent the entire city. Each councilman is elected by the population, the voters of the entire city. So they basically, each one represents the entire city. So the city's
not chopped up into districts or certain
divisions.
areas?
It's not okay. Split up. So that's the way it's been since its creation, and it's it worked very well. It still works very well, in my opinion, as a 5-member city council.
What caused you to run for mayor? Because you'd obviously been involved in intricate ways at the parish level, learned, I guess, how the system worked and the various responsibilities. What motivated you to take the next step?
I was practicing law, serving on the council, and the mayor at that time in 2002 was finishing up his 3rd term.
Are y'all term limited?
No.
Okay.
He was finishing up his 3rd term, and he had chosen not to run for re-election for a 4th term. I liked the mayor a lot. When he chose not to run for re-election, I prayed about it, thought about it, and I felt like the Lord was encouraging me to take a bigger leadership role in the city, and I talked it over with my family, and so
jumped in.
We're going to run for mayor.
As I understand, and it was a 3-person race, and you got a majority of the votes, so no runoffs, and you were there.
Was elected in the general election. There was 3 people running for it, and I was fortunate to secure 56% of the vote. And the next term, for the 2nd term, I was challenged by a city councilman. I won that race with just over 70% of the vote. And for the 3rd term in 2010, I was unopposed.
And why did you decide to, after 3 terms, shut it down?
Well,
I know you've been through some personal trials with health.
True. That's was diagnosed with cancer of my right kidney in 2007. That was successfully, the kidney was successfully removed. The cancer was removed from my body. Periodics, every 6 months I have a checkup. I'm cancer-free, praise God. And
then you had a ruptured appendix?
I had appendicitis, and it ruptured on me as I was waiting for surgery in the Lady of the Lake.
And then almost died from some type of allergic reaction.
2 years after that, in 2011, I suffered an allergic reaction to sulfur. I had no idea I was allergic to that medication.
Remarkable.
And that basically was shutting down my organs, and I was fortunate enough to go to the hospital and survive that episode. And now for 4 years, I've been very healthy.
Like you said, praise the Lord for that. You know, you've mentioned earlier that you surrounded yourself with folks that have made your job possible and easier and successful. So let's continue this on the next segment. This is Locke Meredith Legal Lines. My guest, Mayor Jimmy Durbin for the city of Denham Springs. We'll be right back.
It's time now for Legal Lines Tips with your host, Locke Meredith.
Hello, I'm Locke Meredith, and I have a legal lines tip for you. Remember, knowledge is power. And I want you to know if you're injured, Louisiana law grants you a variety of claims to make sure you're fully compensated. It's generally chopped up into several categories, the first being general damages. That's going to compensate you for your mental and physical pain and suffering, your scarring, disability, functional limitations, your loss of enjoyment of life. Also, it will compensate your family, frankly, for your loss of affection. It's called loss of consortium claim. Next category is specific damages. Those would be, say, for example, past and future lost wages, past and future medical expenses. You also have a claim sometimes for what's called punishment damages or punitive damages, typically only available when you're injured by a drunk party. Finally, you're entitled to legal interest from the date you file your lawsuit until you're paid and court costs. So my legal lines tip to you from me, Locke Meredith. Make sure you know what your claims are.
This has been Legal Lines Tips with your host, Locke Meredith.
Welcome back to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith. Again, I'm very pleased to have on the show for the very first time Mayor Jimmy Durbin. He is a former mayor for 12 years of the city of Denham Springs. Jimmy, thanks again for doing the show.
My pleasure.
You know, you gave us a little background on how you ultimately ran for mayor, lifelong resident of Denham Springs, and you kind of had an interesting situation when you were elected, and within just a few days you kind of got some tough news. Tell the folks about it.
The election was in early October 2002 for mayor, and I was the newly elected mayor, hadn't been taken office yet. And the mayor
But we're on the council.
I was on the council, and the mayor, a practicing attorney, and the mayor asked me if I would meet with him and the city engineer early the following week after the election. And so we met at the engineer's office, Alvin Fairbairn and Associates, Mr. Alvin Fairbairn. And they explained to me that the city was in a woeful situation, tragic situation. We were operating our wastewater treatment without a permit.
That's a big deal.
The permit, which is a 5-year permit, was allowed to be lapsed and not renewed timely in May of 2001. So a year and a half had transpired where the city was operating without a current discharge permit approved by DEQ, which is required by EPA that every operator of a wastewater treatment system has to have a permit current. And the second thing is that I was given the notice that the city was ordered to appear before DEQ later in the month of October 2002 to show cause why the city shouldn't be fined hundreds of thousands of dollars for not meeting.
Which I'm sure the city didn't have laying around in some bank account.
Didn't have it laying around. So
you got a rude awakening to being in charge, I guess.
And the mayor told me, suggested to me that since I am the mayor-elect that I represent the city at that hearing before DEQ. So I began my research of negotiating settlements with DEQ and found an interesting process that DEQ had favored for many years, and those are projects that you can adopt that helps the environment. And you recommend these projects to the administrators at DEQ, and they evaluate whether or not they will approve these in lieu of fines.
So it kind of mitigates the whole...
It still costs, but you can negotiate we negotiated a 5-year workout with DEQ with these projects.
So in essence, instead of paying fines, hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines, the money was used to start building the infrastructure necessary?
Well, correcting some deficiencies that we had and other things, but we couldn't apply any of this to infrastructure except for the engineering of a new wastewater treatment plant.
And so it's interesting because we've talked about it. Your vision for the city, along with I'm sure the council and a lot of the folks in charge, was, you know, we want to grow the city, maintain its uniqueness and beauty, improve it, but clearly didn't have an infrastructure that would support any large kind of investments into the city, and that's happened. I mean, y'all have gone from not having too many of anything to some of the biggest retailers in the nation.
What that experience gave me it incentivized me to then start investigating and looking into our utility infrastructure, water, wastewater, and gas. And I found that it was in need of growth, correction, improvement, and so I was able to then bring that investigation and the knowledge that I had back to the city council that I've been working with and worked with over the years to suggest to them and recommend to them certain projects that we should do.
And I would say that in addition to those factors, y'all added capacity to support growth.
Exactly. Well, when I became mayor, we had 2 water towers, 600,000 gallons above ground, and 4 water wells, all north of the interstate. Now we have an additional 1 million gallon water tower, making up 3, 1,600,000 gallons above ground, and now we have 7 water wells spread out over the entire service area of the water system, and it's balanced.
And I assume that kind of mentality and approach was directed also to roadways, and you've obviously mentioned the sewage, and providing adequate zoning and such.
The zoning, under my leadership, we improved upon our landscaping ordinance. We have improved the zoning ordinance over a period of time, and we are no stricter than East Baton Rouge Parish, St. Tammany Parish. We try not to be harder than anybody else. We try to be even.
Business friendly.
Business friendly.
I think I read ranked number 6 in the entire state as most business friendly.
That's exactly right. Because when business looks into Denham Springs, I'll give you an example. Tractor Supply. These 2 gentlemen, 2 lawyers from Alabama, decided they were going to represent and form a firm that represented big national companies. And they came to Denham Springs looking around, looking at property, because they looked on the internet and they saw something happening in Denham, and that was growth, economic growth. Growth, population-wise, and economic growth. When this gentleman came in to visit, I called in all of the supervisors of our utilities, the business permit, all of these folks, city attorney. So we had a long discussion, and he was so impressed. He actually said so. He says this is the best initial meeting he's ever had in a community going out. Business friendly. When someone comes and looks at your city, some developer, they want to know exactly what they have to do. They don't want to be certainty. They want to know what to do. They don't want to have a big question mark of why can't we do this.
That makes a lot of sense. It's remarkable too, because we've talked about that you needed to improve the infrastructure in all the various ways discussed, but to do that you need money. And so how did you go about accumulating the funds to improve the infrastructure to the point that it now supports Bass Pro and Sam's and all these monster retailers?
Utility improvements that we put in were approximately $50 million in utility improvements. Supported by bond issues, supported by utility fees. And the city councils that I was mayor over picked up on the fact that we had to increase the fees, and we did so reasonably.
And so, to summarize, basically you're borrowing money and then you're paying the money back with the fees generated. We'll continue this on the next segment. This is Locke Meredith, Legal Lines. My guest, Mayor Jimmy Durbin, Denham Springs. We'll be right back.
It's time now for Legal Lines Tips with your host, Locke Meredith.
Hello, I'm Locke Meredith, and I have a Legal Lines tip for you. Remember, knowledge is power, and I want you to know if you're injured and you have lost wages because of that injury, Louisiana law gives you a claim for that loss. Typically, it's going to require medical evidence from a medical doctor stating because of your injuries you can't work. It's a pretty simple claim. If you had a job before the injury, doc says you can't work from the date of the accident, and 3 months later he says you can work, you can figure out what you've lost in wages. Circumstances occur, however, when the injury results in permanent physical and functional limitations. Now you can't do the job according to the doctor that you could do before the accident. So the question becomes, is there any work you can do, and what is the difference in wages? But the court doesn't just look at what you earned in the past, it also looks at your earning capacity. That is your ability to earn wages in the future, promotions, additional education. So my Legal Lines tip from me, Locke Meredith, to you is make sure you know your rights when you're presenting that lost wage claim.
This has been Legal Lines Tips.
Welcome back to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith. Again, very pleased to have on the show for the first time Mayor Jimmy Durbin. He's the former mayor for 12 years of the city of Denham Springs. Jimmy, let's kind of dive right back in. You knew that the infrastructure had to be improved to allow for more growth. And so you faced the quandary of how do I get the money to make these improvements to the infrastructure? You indicated that you had good advice and good counsel, and then describe the process.
Well, there's a number of different types of bond issues, but with utilities, it's called a utility revenue bond issue, supported by utility fees, from water fees, wastewater fees, and gas fees. The fees have to be set at a certain amount to cover the three things: debt service, operations of your departments, and depreciation.
Of the equipment?
Depreciation of the infrastructure.
Right.
And so with not having that type of knowledge, you have to bring in experienced people that have handled these type of bond issues all over the state, and we did.
And when we say bond issues, really what we're saying is borrowing money.
Borrowing money, actually selling bonds
to investors.
And those bonds are paid back over a 30-year or 40-year period of time with interest.
But you got a lot of hoops you got to jump through to get to that point.
Exactly. So all your rates are the key. Your utility rates are basically the key in the operations of your city, the financial stability of the city. And so all of those are reviewed by various individuals. Even in New York City, Standard & Poor's reviews our city operation. And we currently have an A+ credit rating with Standard & Poor's. We're very proud of that. And so let's
reiterate what that means, that you have a stable community, stable source of revenue, you have a proven track record of being able to pay back the debt.
Exactly.
Timely and quickly, every time.
So over the period, and just recently before I left office, Standard & Poor's reviewed our credit rating and reassured and reaffirmed the A+ credit rating. But you don't get those A+ credit ratings unless your city is financially stable. But with these bond issues, you have bond counsel, very reputable bond counsel, very reputable financial advisors, and then you have to, and they are familiar with the bond process and going before the State Bond Commission. Those were all handled successfully. Even the visit to New York City before Standard & Poor's and answering questions to those folks. So we were able to then issue bonds that would generate the revenue to put the infrastructure in the ground and on top of the ground.
One more thing to point out, I think, Jimmy, is how important that credit rating is, because that determines how much you're going to have to pay in interest on the money that you borrow, right?
That's exactly right.
And so you've got all your ducks in a row. They look really great, but just because it looks great to you and Moody's doesn't mean you finished crossing the goal line. You got to convince the bond commission that it's feasible. It's going to work.
Exactly. And so we were able to successfully improve our water system, our wastewater. We built a brand new wastewater treatment plant that is one of the best in the state of Louisiana and the Southeast. We have visitors from South America, from all over, coming to Denham Springs. DEQ sends employees to look at our wastewater treatment plant.
As the model.
LSU sends engineers over to look at our wastewater treatment plant. We're very proud of this system, and because of this, with having the vision of building a plant with excess capacity, then we were able to accommodate additional growth that both commercial and residential development in the Denham Springs area.
And meaning not just within the city limits of Denham Springs, because I think you've mentioned Jubin Crossing is actually using y'all's system to some degree and having to pay for it.
All of the sewer that is generated at Jubin Crossing in their retail area right now, and soon, one day next year or this year, their residential is going to be transmitted through force mains to our wastewater treatment plant. So we're seeing additional revenue from Jubin Crossing, even though it's outside of the city limits and outside of our.
That's wonderful. Let's talk about what you accomplished with that 75-acre tract of land where we've got Bass Pro and Sam's and all these fantastic stores. That's a big feat that you pulled off there.
Tell you, from the beginning, when I became mayor, I began working with the individual, Jacob Fakuri, who had a purchase agreement on the 75 acres from the family that had owned it for many years. It was outside of the city limits. Most of the 75 acres was outside of the city limits. So I was able to work with Mr. Fakuri and an adjoining landowner, the Underwood family, to annex roughly
Into the
60
city
acres
limits.
into the city limits.
Makes sense.
Because we had to, if it was going to be with my help to work on putting together a tax increment finance bond issue to build Bass Pro and attract Bass Pro, we wanted it inside the city limits. And we were successful in annexing that acreage into the city.
And the way the system works is, from what you've explained to me, is you got a lot of different political groups. Yeah. The city of Denham Springs, the sheriff of Livingston, school folks, but the state participated. Explain that.
The bond issue wouldn't work with 4 pennies, 4 cents on the dollar generated from the locals. So we decided to visit with the state, the Louisiana Economic Development, the governor, Governor Blanco, and so we were able to convince the Commissioner of Administration and the governor then that it would be a workable situation and a very successful tax increment finance district if they would be willing to commit 2 pennies of the sales of the state sales tax. There's 4 pennies of state sales tax, 2 pennies for 20 years. The bond issue was successful. It happened. It was we secured 3/4 of the vote of the Joint Legislative Budget Committee and then the Bond Commission, 3/4. So the bonds were issued and we built Bass Pro, and now we have the 3rd Sam's in the region sitting next to it.
That's right.
The $50 million in bonds was issued in early '06, so it was a 30-year bond issue. And here's the good news: with all the additional businesses that have built up around Bass Pro, the bond issue is not going to pay off in 30 years. It's going to pay off in 13 to 14
That's
years.
Amazing. Very successful.
So
I also read that you have a surplus in the state, in the city budget. Let's talk about, it's remarkable what you accomplished there, and it's obviously building on itself. Let's talk about kind of the vision in the future that you have, that you foresee for the city of Denham Springs, because it's also very safe, great schools, great place for families. Explain to the folks. We've only got about a minute.
Operating a city requires revenue to be a successful city, because the residents of the city that vote for you or vote to elect you expect a return on living in the city. They expect good streets. They expect a clean city. And we have provided that in Denham Springs over these last 12 years, and I'm very confident that my friend, the current mayor of the city of Denham Springs, Gerard Landry, will continue doing the same.
Jimmy, it's wonderful to have you on the show. Very much appreciate it. This is Locke Meredith, Legal Lines, former mayor of the city of Denham Springs. Jimmy Durbin, thank you for being with us.